Can I say at the outset, I welcome the participants, and I'm unashamed supporter of publicans and pubs, and we're an endangered species in this place at the moment because they've been blamed for everything, all the social ills. Notwithstanding that, I think that the irresponsible behaviour of some people in relation to alcohol, particularly from a road traffic point of view, is something that nobody would condone. But that being said, I think that there has been a very orchestrated and a very successful campaign at demonising everything to do with the licensed trade in this country over many years, and I think that's something that the licensed trade themselves, with people in here, will have to contend with. Just in relation to, I suppose it's important to bear out that governments don't get everything right. But when governments do get everything right, it's nice to acknowledge it. And this year there was no increase, for instance, in excise duty in relation to the price of alcohol going forward. I think that was important, and it was in no small way through the incentives or the lobbying that was done from the licensed trade. But I recall there the time that the government introduced the reduced VAT on the hospitality and tourism sectors. And it was funded out of a particular initiative that the government launched at the time, the Jobs Initiative. And it was railed against by the opposition. The opposition went absolutely bananas over it. Now, I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And I just think from your point of view as organisations that when governments get things wrong, and that happens a bit, representative organisations are very quick out of the blocks to criticise. But when the opposition come out with some clangers, and by God they have come out with some right ones, I would find it a bit, that the shoe never goes onto the other foot, that you're not inclined to kick the opposition for some of the clangers that they've come out with and the criticism that they've come out with of the industry. I mean, some people on the opposition benches thought that reducing, for instance, the travel tax to zero was a bad idea. Now, certainly in my region it's not a bad idea, because the Midwestern region, close proximity to Shannon Airport, is a hugely important thing. And the opposition parties as a whole opposed the Jobs Initiative. But I didn't hear any of the representative organisations who ultimately were beneficiaries of it criticise the opposition for, being short-sighted and playing party politics, which they're very good at, and they get a lot of sound bites out of it. But the proof of it is that there's 40,000 people more work in the hospitality industry. And I think that as you analyse pre-budget submissions as well, and I'd say this to everybody, farmers, employers, unions, the whole shooting gallery, I think you have an onus of responsibility to your own members and to the people who support you and support your industry and the people who work for you to criticise, in a very constructive way, opposition proposals when it comes to pre-budget submissions, because some of their stuff is just so off of the wall that it would destroy your industry. I mean, they're talking about wealth taxes, they're talking about increases in employers' PRSI, they're jacking up service charges and commercial rates because they don't want people paying for domestic water. So, in the pre-budget submissions of the main opposition parties, there would be a whole clatter of landmines that would go off in you guys' faces. And I think there's a responsibility on you for the next budget, certainly, to critique in a very constructive way some of the absolute ludicrous suggestions that some people in this place come up with. Just in relation to the hotels, and I'll come back to the pubs in a minute, your relationship with NAMA, would you kind of elaborate for us on how you're getting on with them? Because I know there's a lot of unfortunate people who would have built hotels, through no fault of their own, who ran into difficulties. That those hotels now are in a different legal ownership. Would you kind of elaborate as to how you're getting on with them in terms of the viability of those hotels? Just in relation then to we'd be failing in our job here if we didn't kind of relay some of the criticisms that are levied at us, and Senator Terry Brennan is absolutely right. There is a temptation to go back, I think, to the pre-economic collapse days, certainly in Dublin, that at the first whiff of a quick buck, hotels put up the prices, and it's happening every week. And you can tell whether it is the Web Summit or whether it is whoever is in town, if it's a concert or whatever. Hotels in Dublin, and maybe your own organisation should ring around from time to time. They are back, they're back at it again, and they're back at jacking up the prices, realising that there's a limited number of beds, realising that there's a shortage of supply, and they're back fleecing people again. So what is your suggestion as to how you can treat your members who do that to consumers, particularly, Deputy Griffin said.
But if you want to elaborate.
No, but in relation to the Irish consumer, I suppose, because Deputy Griffin made a very good point that we have a very poor record in terms of bringing people back into Ireland from overseas, and I'm just wondering, are the two related? And I'm also, one of the things that's related to us, and we'd be failing in our job if we didn't bring it up here, is proficiency in English. And I know that there was an issue raised a while ago about training, and people like to have a taste of Ireland when they come from food and culture and things like that. And I'm not for one instance suggesting that these jobs should be to preserve of Irish people only, but certainly there have been instances, and has been reported in the media recently. I know that one very high-profile publican raised this as an issue in relation to proficiency in English, and again, somebody coming to Ireland to flavour the Irish tourism industry. You don't obviously, particularly in Dublin and places like that, expect them to be fluent Oscuelga, but certainly you should be able to converse in English, and I'd like to get your views on that. Just then, in relation to, you mentioned in relation to the publicans, the increases in excise duty, and there is none for this year. I would just in relation to your own industry and how it relates to your suppliers, and I suppose if I would contrast you to the farmers and the way in which the farmers have, engaged with the beef industry and the meat industry in relation to going forward, what's your engagement with the brewers? Because I don't see any of the brewers like on the breadline, and certainly I don't see any of the brewers returning massive losses year on year, and certainly with their advertising revenue, none of them are on the breadline, and they're all very formidable organisations, but you're formidable as well in the sense that you have a considerable amount of members who have a considerable amount of buying power and who are giving the product on to a considerable amount of people. So what are the brewers doing in terms, the government will obviously, I suppose, be challenged by you, and quite rightly so, in relation to excise duty, but what are you doing in relation to getting the brewers to bring down their prices? Because it has to be a two-way street at the end of the day. And just finally, again, as I say, a family connection to the public house trade, and one of the things that irks me is that it has been demonised, and has been the name of the public house now has been associated with all of the social ills. Everything that's wrong with Ireland, you could nearly find it inside of the counter of the pub, if you were to believe some people in the media. Just in what's your, because I know Deputy McEntee referred to what are you doing in terms of trying to promote the industry, and you referred to Fáilte, Ireland, but in relation to, I suppose, changing the image of the public house as somewhere where it is safe to drink, in terms of the fact that your alcohol consumption is monitored, unlike what happens at home when it's in an uncontrolled environment. So have you any plans to try and, I suppose, take out that message of the social element, as well as the cultural element, as well as the safety aspect, and as well as the control element? Because for younger people especially, if you're looking at it at the moment, the amount of spirits that are consumed, the amount of, especially amongst young women, in an uncontrolled environment, is hugely worrying, and I'd just like to get your views on that. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay.